Okay, so let's get right into it. Today, we're unpacking one of the wildest stories in all of history. Seriously, it's the story of how a single for-profit company managed to take over the entire Indian subcontinent and then basically hand it over to the British Empire.
I mean, how does that even happen, right? How does a single company conquer a whole subcontinent? It sounds impossible. This wasn't an army from a country invading, not at first anyway. So how on earth did a corporation pull this off? Let's dive in and break it down.
All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the company's early ambitions, then watch how they shifted from just trading to actually grabbing territory. After that, we'll look at the Great Rebellion that changed everything, the rise of nationalism that followed, and finally, the complicated story of freedom and partition.
To really get this, you have to picture where it all started. And believe it or not, it wasn't with armies and flags, it was with ships and spices and a group of English businessmen who just wanted to make some money in the East.
Now look at these dates. This is so important. This wasn't some lightning-fast invasion. We're talking about a whole century, 100 years. The East India Company was playing the long game, slowly and carefully setting up these trading hubs. And these places, they would become the building blocks for everything that came next.
Okay, this is the part you really need to wrap your head around, because it's wild. The British East India Company was not the British government. It was a private company, with shareholders and a board of directors. But, and this is the crazy part, it had its own flag and its own private army. Can you imagine a company today having its own military? It's just an insane amount of power for a corporation.
And, well, with all that money and its own army, things were bound to change. The company's goals got bigger. Suddenly, it wasn't just about trading anymore. It was about ruling. If you had to point to one single moment where the whole story pivots, it's this one right here, the Battle of Plassey in 1757. This is the moment the company goes from being merchants to being the masters of India. It's a huge deal.
So how did they win? Well, this story is less about military might and more about, well, dirty tricks. The company's leader, Robert Clive, was up against a much, much larger army. He should have lost. But Clive was clever. He found cracks in the enemy's camp, exploited their internal drama, and convinced one of the Nawab's most important commanders to switch sides. Boom. A total game changer.
But don't think for a second this was easy for them. This was not a walk in the park. They faced some incredibly tough resistance. And you have to talk about Tipu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore. This guy was a legend. He was a military genius using these advanced, iron-cased rockets that literally terrified the British. He fought them tooth and nail.
So, fast forward 100 years. By 1857, all the anger and resentment against company rule, it had all been simmering for a long, long time, and it was about to boil over. What happened next was the single greatest threat the British ever faced in India.
You know how sometimes it's the smallest thing that sets off a huge explosion? That's exactly what happened here. The British introduced new rifle cartridges for their Indian soldiers, or sepoys. To load the rifle, you had to bite the cartridge open. The problem? A rumor spread that they were greased with cow and pig fat. For Hindus, cows are sacred. For Muslims, pigs are unclean. So this was a massive insult. One soldier, Mangal Pandey, finally had enough and attacked his officers. And that one act lit the fuse. And during this rebellion, some truly incredible leaders emerged. One of the most famous, an absolute icon, was Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi. She was a queen who refused to back down, who literally led her own troops into battle. Her courage made her a symbol of Indian resistance that inspires people to this day. In the end, though, the rebellion didn't succeed. It was crushed. But it changed everything. The British government back in London looked at this mess and said, okay, this company can't handle it anymore. So they dissolved the East India Company. And in 1858, the British Crown took over direct control. This is when the British Raj officially begins.
So now, with the British government directly in charge, the nature of the resistance started to change too. It wasn't just about spontaneous uprisings anymore. The fight for freedom got organized, it got political, and it started to unite people from all across India.
And you can kind of see how it grew. It starts in 1885 with the Indian National Congress, which was mostly a group of educated elites just asking for a bigger say. But then Gandhi comes back to India in 1915, and he was the real game changer. He took that elite club and turned it into a massive movement for millions of everyday Indians. So how do you fight one of the world's biggest empires?
Gandhi's answer was, you don't fight fire with fire, you fight with an idea. His idea was called Satyagraha, which basically means truth force. It was this radical new strategy of nonviolent protest, marches, boycotts, refusing to obey unjust laws. The goal wasn't to physically beat the British, but to challenge them morally.
And all of this leads us to the final act. Decades of struggle are about to come to a head. An empire is about to fall, and in its place, something new, and very complicated, is about to be born.
In these last few decades, the pressure just became relentless. You had these huge nationwide movements like the famous Salt March and the Quit India movement. But it wasn't just nonviolence. You also had revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh, who believed in a more direct struggle. All of this, plus Britain being exhausted after World War II, well, their grip on India just wasn't sustainable anymore.
And then finally, the year, 1947. After almost 2 centuries of British rule and a long, hard-fought struggle, India was finally independent.
But this moment of freedom was also a moment of incredible tragedy. Because as the British left, they drew a line on a map. They partitioned the subcontinent based on religion and created a new country, Pakistan. What followed was chaos. It sparked one of the biggest, most violent mass migrations in all of human history. The scars from that event, they still haven't healed. Which brings us to the big question at the end of it all. What is the legacy of this? I mean, it's so complex, isn't it? You have things like parliamentary democracy, the English language, a massive railway system, but you also have the deep, painful scars of partition. So, what do you think is the most enduring legacy? It's definitely something to think about.